In a world where success often comes at a steep price, one man discovers that the true measure of wealth lies not in what we achieve, but in the connections we make. Ethan Carson, a tech mogul with everything a man could desire, has spent his life building an empire. But there's a void he can't ignore. Across the city, two young men are about to uncover a family secret that will change everything they thought they knew. This is a story of second chances, lost time, and the power of love. Subscribe to our channel to start today's story with life stories. Ethan Carson stood by the windows of his penthouse office, gazing out at the New York skyline. The late afternoon sun shimmered over the city's glass towers, casting long, golden shadows across the streets below. At 52, Ethan had everything anyone could dream of. His company, Carson Technologies, was one of the leading firms in artificial intelligence. It had revolutionized industries and reshaped the future of tech. He had amassed a fortune beyond measure and was a well-respected figure in the tech world, often gracing the covers of business magazines and attending high-profile galas. His sleek Tesla, parked in the private garage beneath his building, was a symbol of his success. He had all the material wealth one could ask for, the cars, the buildings, the vacations. He was respected, admired, and envied. Yet, despite everything he had achieved, something gnawed at him. There was an emptiness inside him that no amount of money or recognition seemed to fill. He'd never been good at naming that feeling, but it was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. It wasn't loneliness, but something deeper. He had spent years building his empire, pouring all his energy into making Carson Technologies the giant it had become. He had sacrificed personal connections, had allowed relationships to slip through his fingers. His marriage had crumbled years ago, a casualty of his obsession with success. His son, Oliver, was away at boarding school in Switzerland, another distant echo of a life he had neglected to build. And yet, as he stood there looking at the vast city sprawled below him, a profound sense of loneliness crept into his chest. In the midst of all his accomplishments, he felt lost. Elsewhere in the city, across town in a modest apartment above a local bookstore, 25-year-old twins Ryan and Noah Carter sat in their mother Grace's hospital room. Her illness had taken a turn for the worse. The cancer that had initially seemed under control was now spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Time was slipping away from them. Grace, once vibrant and full of energy, now lay frail and pale against the stark white sheets. Her once warm smile replaced by a tired, yet still determined, expression. She had always been strong, a woman who had worked double shifts at a diner to keep food on the table for her children. She was the one who had supported Ryan and Noah through every challenge, pushing them to work harder, to aim higher. It was her unwavering belief in them that had earned them scholarships to prestigious universities. Grace had been both mother and father to them, always juggling work, school, and the countless responsibilities of raising two boys on her own. Her breath was shallow as she looked at her sons, her eyes flickering between them. "Boys," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've been thinking, it's time." Ryan, sitting closest to her, took her fragile hand in his. "Mom, please, you're scaring us." "I know, sweetheart," she replied, her eyes misting. "But there's something you need to know. Something I've kept from you both for a long time." Noah's voice cracked. "What is it, Mom? You can tell us anything." Grace took a slow, deep breath. Her hand trembled as she reached for a worn leather journal on the nightstand. She opened it slowly, revealing faded newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes from years ago. As she leafed through the pages, she seemed lost in the memories. The twins watched in silence, unsure of what she was about to say. But the weight of the moment was undeniable. "I kept this all these years," she began, her voice breaking slightly. "Everything about him." Ryan and Noah exchanged puzzled looks. "About who, Mom?" Ryan asked, his voice low. "About your father," Grace whispered. The words hit them like a physical blow. The question they had asked for years, the question that had always been on the tip of their tongues, finally had an answer. Who was their father? Grace's voice quivered as she spoke the name. Your father is Ethan Carson. The twins sat in stunned silence. Ethan Carson, the name they had heard in the news, seen in articles, and read about in interviews. He was the tech mogul, the visionary who had built a global empire in artificial intelligence. His face appeared regularly on the covers of business magazines. And his company, Carson Technologies, was synonymous with innovation. He was a man of extraordinary wealth, recognition, and success. Yet, to Ryan and Noah, he was just a name, a mystery. They had walked past his building countless times without ever knowing he was their father. The man who had unknowingly shaped their lives. Why didn't you tell us? Noah asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Grace wiped her eyes, her fingers trembling as she held the journal. I couldn't ruin his life. He was building something so important. I couldn't be the one to take that from him. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We met when I was young. I worked as a junior software developer at his first startup. He was brilliant, driven, and married. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew my life would change forever. His company was on the brink of its first breakthrough. He was working long hours, sacrificing everything to keep his dream alive. I couldn't bring myself to be the one who ruined everything. Ryan and Noah's hearts tightened as they listened to their mother's words. So, you left? Ryan asked quietly. Grace nodded. Yes, I left. I took a job across the city and raised you both on my own. Trying to give you the life I never had. The twins exchanged a glance, their minds racing with emotions they could hardly process. The man they had seen on TV, the man who had everything, was their father, and their mother, the woman who had worked tirelessly for them, had carried this secret for years. It was as if their world had been tilted on its axis. I kept hoping, Grace continued, her voice softening, that one day you would understand. And now, maybe it's time to tell him. Maybe he deserves to know the truth, too. She gently pressed the journal into Ryan's hands. The twins looked at each other, the weight of their mother's words sinking in. Their lives were about to change forever. They weren't sure what the future held. But one thing was certain, they were going to find their father. The man they had unknowingly admired from afar. And the man who had shaped their destiny in ways they could never have imagined. The puzzle pieces of their lives were slowly starting to come together. The following days passed in a blur for Ryan and Noah. After their mother's revelation, they were both consumed by the overwhelming realization that their lives had been tethered to Ethan Carson's success in ways they had never known. Every news article they had read about him, every interview they had watched, these weren't just stories about a famous billionaire tech mogul. They were stories about their father, the man who had unknowingly shaped the course of their lives, even though he had never been a part of them. That night, after their mother's revelation, the twins sat together at their small kitchen table, poring over the journal she had given them. Each page was filled with newspaper clippings, photographs, and pieces of their father's life that Grace had carefully preserved over the years. Ryan carefully sifted through the faded photos, his fingers brushing over a young Ethan standing proudly outside his first office. A converted garage in Silicon Valley. His green eyes, the same ones that looked back at Ryan and Noah every morning, seemed full of hope and determination. Look at this, Noah said, pointing to an old newspaper article from 1999. The headline read, Ethan Carson saves startup, lands major deal with Watson Corp. He ran his fingers across the text, a sense of awe in his voice. He almost lost everything that first year. The company was 3 days from bankruptcy when he landed the Watson contract. Ryan, sitting across from him, shook his head in disbelief. How different would our lives have been if that deal hadn't come through? If his company had failed? The question hung in the air, unanswered. It was impossible to know how their mother's life, and theirs, might have unfolded if Ethan hadn't found success when he did. Ryan leaned back, staring at the worn pages of the journal. It was a complicated feeling, a mixture of admiration for his father's drive and a deep ache that his success had come at such a cost. As they continued to read, The twins couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between their father's glamorous life and their own. Ethan's charity galas, his philanthropy, his lavish lifestyle, they had seen it all in the media. Meanwhile, Ryan and Noah had grown up in a modest apartment, their lives filled with the struggle to make ends meet. They had earned everything they had through hard work, relying on their mother's unwavering belief in them. They'd never asked for anything from their father. He hadn't been there, and they had learned to make do without him. But now, with the truth revealed, they couldn't help but feel a sense of injustice. Ethan had lived a life of unimaginable success, while they had lived a life of sacrifice and uncertainty. Noah, remember when Mom used to take us to that park across from Carson Technologies? Ryan said suddenly, his mind drifting to a memory that had always seemed so innocent. She'd pack our lunch, and we'd sit there for hours. I always thought she just liked the view. But now, Noah finished the thought for him. She was giving us glimpses of his world, the closest she could get to showing us who he was. It was a bittersweet realization. Their mother had kept them connected to their father's world in small, unspoken ways, hoping that someday they would understand. And now, they were on the verge of meeting the man who had shaped their destiny. A man they had never known. The charity gala at the Augustine, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, was just days away. Their mother had told them that Ethan would be attending, speaking at the event about his latest philanthropic initiatives, including a project to bring AI education to underfunded schools. The twins were determined to attend, to finally meet their father, and to reveal the truth that had been hidden from him for so long. But how would they get in? The gala was invitation only, and they had no connection to the glittering world Ethan inhabited. It was Ryan who came up with a plan. He had recently won a high-profile environmental lawsuit against a tech giant, a case that had saved the company from a major public relations disaster. The judge who had overseen the case happened to be on the board of directors at the Augustine. After a few phone calls, Ryan had managed to secure 2 invitations to the gala. They were in. Noah stared at the invitations in disbelief, the elegant gold lettering catching the dim light of their apartment. "We're really doing this," he said quietly. His voice was full of awe, but also a tinge of nervousness. "After all these years, we're finally going to meet him." The plan was set. The next few days were filled with preparation. They needed to get the right clothes, the right look. They weren't part of the world Ethan Carson inhabited, but for one night, they were going to step into it, and they were going to make him see them. They were his sons, and they deserved to be seen. At a high-end menswear store in Manhattan, they were fitted for tuxedos. The tailor, adjusting nose collar, mentioned casually, "Mr. Carson himself was in here last week, having his gala tuxedo altered. Very particular about the details. Just like you young men." The comment sent a ripple of disbelief through both twins. Ethan Carson, the man they had only ever read about, had been in the same store, just days before them. It felt like another sign, another strange connection between their lives. Even though they had never known each other, their paths had always been parallel. But they were about to meet. Their lives, which had once seemed so disconnected, were finally coming together. The night of the gala arrived, and the twins found themselves standing in the opulent entrance hall of the Augustine, the most exclusive restaurant in New York. Marble floors gleamed beneath their polished shoes, and crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow across the space. The air was filled with the murmur of the city's elite, venture capitalists, tech moguls, and philanthropists, gathered to celebrate the latest advancements in artificial intelligence and its role in transforming education. For most of the attendees, the evening was just another high society event. But for Ryan and Noah, it was the culmination of years of waiting, wondering, and now, finally, acting on the truth they had uncovered. "Mr. Carter, Dr. Carter," the manager greeted them with a smile, ushering them to their table. "You'll be seated at table 7. Mr. Carson is at the head table, of course, though he's running a little late due to a last-minute conference call." Ryan and Noah exchanged a look as they made their way through the room. They could hardly believe that this was happening. that they were about to meet the man who had shaped their entire lives. Without ever knowing them, the room hummed with excitement as more guests filtered in, all eager to hear Ethan Carson speak about his latest philanthropic efforts. Ryan's mind raced as they sat down at their table, the grand surroundings sinking in. They had worked so hard for everything they had. And yet, in the midst of all this wealth and luxury, they felt like outsiders. The soft clink of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation seemed distant, as if they were observing someone else's world. They weren't part of this world, yet here they were, sitting among the very people who had admired their father from afar. The evening proceeded, and Ryan's nerves began to settle as he focused on the task at hand, to meet Ethan and finally reveal the truth. They had rehearsed what they would say 100 times. But now, with the reality of it all hitting them, they couldn't quite figure out how to begin. What would they say to the man who had been so absent in their lives? What would he say to them? Suddenly, the room fell silent as Ethan Carson walked in. He entered with the quiet confidence of someone used to being the center of attention. His tall frame cutting through the crowd with ease. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored, his presence commanding the room. And then, for the briefest moment, his eyes met theirs. Green eyes, just like theirs. The connection was instant, a shock of recognition that sent a jolt through both Ryan and Noah. The resemblance was undeniable. They were looking at their father, the man they had read about and seen on television for so many years. But now, standing before him, they felt a strange mix of awe, anger, and vulnerability. Ryan's heart raced, and Noah instinctively reached for his phone, his fingers trembling. They had spent years imagining this moment, but now that it was here, it felt surreal. Ethan moved through the room, shaking hands and greeting people by name. He was charismatic, the life of the party, his presence effortlessly drawing people in. As he reached the podium to prepare for his speech, the twins exchanged a final, knowing look. This was it, the moment of truth was upon them. But just as Ethan began to speak, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A nurse hurried into the room, scanning the crowd until she spotted Noah. "Dr. Carter, it's your mother. She's in critical condition. You need to come right away." The room went silent, and all eyes turned toward the twins. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Ethan's expression faltered, his gaze shifting between the nurse and the twins, before his eyes widened with realization. The name, Carter, hung in the air. The connection had been made. Noah stood up immediately, his medical instincts kicking in. But Ryan remained rooted to his seat, his mind racing. With a steady hand, he pulled out their mother's journal, which had been resting in his pocket the entire evening. He held it up for all to see, the tattered edges and faded photographs a testament to the years of secrets it contained. "She's been asking for you." Ryan's voice cut through the stunned silence. "She's been waiting for you to know the truth. You were never told about us. But we're your sons, and it's time you knew." The words seemed to echo across the room, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The guests sat frozen, as if witnessing a scene from a movie. Ethan stood motionless, staring at the twins, as a flood of memories and emotions rushed through him. The journal, the near collision outside the coffee shop, the familiar name, it was all starting to make sense. His pulse quickened as he stared at the two young men who were unmistakably his sons. With a breath that seemed to come from deep within, Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "The twins," he breathed. I had no idea." His eyes were wide, as if a veil had been lifted, and the truth had finally broken through the walls he had built around himself. Ethan stepped down from the podium, his mind racing as he walked toward the twins, who were now standing, unsure of what to expect. The noise of the gala faded as Ethan's gaze shifted from the journal to the twins themselves. Taking in every detail, the same green eyes, the same strong jawline, the same quiet resolve. The moment had arrived, and in that moment, their lives, so long shaped by secrets and silence, were about to intersect in a way that no one could have predicted. As the car sped towards the hospital, the air inside seemed to thicken with anticipation. Ethan sat between his sons, the worn leather journal open on his lap. He read the words his mother had written. A letter to him she had never sent. The words were like an echo, reverberating through him with each sentence. The sadness, the love, and the regret in those lines hit him harder than he expected. She never wanted to hold you back, Ryan explained quietly, watching his father with a soft but intense gaze. She thought she was doing the right thing, by protecting your future. Ethan's grip tightened on the journal. All those years, he had been searching for something, but never knew what he was truly missing. His mind raced with thoughts of all the milestones he had missed. All the birthdays, graduations, and moments of triumph that could have been shared. His gaze shifted to his sons, Ryan with his sharp legal mind, and Noah with his dedication to healing. He saw so much of Grace in them. The kindness, the intelligence, the tenacity, they were her legacy. And his, too. When they arrived at the hospital, Ethan felt a sense of clarity he had never known before. He walked into Grace's room, where she lay weak but still strong in spirit. The family stood together, a unit that had been broken and now, in a strange twist of fate, was healed. "This is our new beginning," Ethan said, as he sat beside Grace's bed, holding her fragile hand. It was a moment of reconciliation, of second chances, and above all, of love, a love that had waited 25 years to be fully realized. As the family embraced, the journey of healing and rebuilding their lives had only just begun. Subscribe to our channel to follow more inspiring life stories. Stories of family, second chances, and the power of love.